Hello, everyone. I'm Shaheen, the host for Growth Colony podcast from X-Growth. And today we're diving into a conversation that challenges the traditional view of regional marketing teams. Instead of just executing HQ-driven strategies, what if a regional team, especially here in APJ, could actually lead innovation for a global company? My guest is Nicholas Kontopoulos, VP of Marketing for APJ at Twilio. He and his team have turned APJ into a powerhouse for marketing innovation, so much so that their ideas are influencing Twilio's global strategy. In this episode, we'll explore how Nicholas has built a culture where APJ doesn't just take orders, but drives real change. We'll uncover how this team in APJ gets global recognition despite being one of the smallest regions in the world, and how AI is shaping the future of marketing at Twilio and beyond. Plus, Nicholas will share how he's personally using AI in his daily work. So stay tuned and listen closely. Nicholas, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Mate, my pleasure. Great to be back second time, I think.
Second time?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm really glad that we were able to make this happen, and I'm really glad that we could make this happen in person.
Awesome. Yeah, always best to have a white CI conversation. But yeah, great to be in town, and what a great city Melbourne is. I'm a Sydney boy. I guess I'm not supposed to admit that, but I love coming to Melbourne.
Yeah, this is getting very controversial very quickly at the beginning of the podcast. So no, but it's great. It's great to have you here and meet in person. I want to start with this kind of concept of driving innovation in APJ, right? Because we've chatted about this before, where this is a little bit different, especially with organizations that are HQ'd US. There is a lot of drive from the US. This is what you should do, dictation of what you should do in the region. I want to first get your thoughts on defining what you mean by, or what is your definition of kind of locally and regionally driving innovation, especially in marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate to work with a company that has 4 core values that it literally does put into practice. So be a builder, be an owner, be curious, and be a positron. So those 4 values really struck a chord to me actually when Twilio approached me, and I was looking at the business, and it actually came through very strongly in terms of even the interview process, and ultimately when I arrived here, obviously that's the moment of truth, right? So are they able to put these enable these values to be put into practice? And I was really excited to see that was the case when I joined. So Twilio really does enable its leaders and its people to really take ownership of what they're doing in their respective functions. So in marketing, it was very clear from the onset that I was a leader of APJ. Me and my team were the subject matter experts in terms of that region, and we're given the freedom and both creatively and as well as just as a business unit to really look at how we could build a go-to-market strategy that really reflected the needs of the region, right? So yeah, I think in terms of what's unique for me is that I've come into a company that really understands the value of pushing decision-making to the edge of the organization and enabling the leaders and the people to be able to put that into practice on a daily basis. So yeah, super exciting. It's not just limited to my region. It's all regions have the same capacity. And I think that is the secret sauce, actually. It's the ability to harness that collective intelligence across the ecosystem that supports the business. And that's not just us as Twilio employees. It also applies to the partners we work with and how they also are enabled to work with us in a similar capacity and help push us in the direction we need to go. So super exciting. I've been here 2.5 years, and I've got a small but mighty team. And that small but mighty team is full of passionate individuals that are all each day striving to look at creative new ways to help us, build a brand in the region that, and I'm pleased to say that we've seen some really great successes over the last couple of years, which I'm more than happy to share some insights on. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to examples of that creativity coming out. But at the beginning, maybe for everyone who's listening and for their context, I think it would be great to know what actually falls under your remit. What are the areas that you're responsible for? Because I know sometimes again, with global organizations, the local team might not be responsible for the brand work, or they might not be responsible for digital, and that's running out of HQ or whatever it is. Very curious to know what does fall under your remit here in the region, and then we can maybe
great question. So basically everything between brand to revenue. So what do I mean by that? I'm a big proponent of the idea of brand to revenue. I think you need to think as a marketing leader and as marketeurs in that mindset. But what are the functions? So it's everything from comms. So I have dotted line and hard line reporting in region. So there's teams that roll into global teams, but they sit in region and support APJ specifically. So that'll be PR. So I've got a fantastic PR team in region. They dotted line into me. We've got product marketing dotted line into me in region. We've got MOPS dotted line in region. We've got SDR organization. We go all the way through to field marketing. We've got then a demand creation hub, which includes regional events, digital marketing, campaigns. So again, a team that's focused on building in-region campaigns in partnership with global and the field teams. I'm hoping I haven't forgotten anyone here. I'm going through. And so basically all of those functions that you would ideally dream of having in region, I've got at least a representative in region that's working. Again, got a great product marketing person in region whose sole job is to look at APJ and to act as that interlock back into the mothership from a product marketing perspective. So all of these folks are working in an integrated fashion. So that's a big important point. They all work together in an integrated fashion. So we're one team basically. That's been really at the heart of what I was trying to do when I came in. When I came in, I think our marketing setup was not too dissimilar to a lot of tech companies. You had a lot of awesome talent sitting in the organizations, but they weren't connected. They weren't operating in a integrated fashion. They often are working in silos. And so you had global representation in region, but they weren't necessarily talking to the local teams, which they were all ultimately they were all in the same boat, trying to go in the same direction, but not necessarily rowing to the same drum beat. So really the big focus for me over the first 18 months was to get that team integrated and have a common vision and in terms of where we're going. And then obviously that's all very dependent on having great leadership at a global level. So I've got great privilege of having fantastic CMO, Chris Kohler, who joined the business coming up to a year, I think now, who again has enabled us to work and is bringing the organization at a global level into a more integrated fashion as well. So we've got this sort of connective tissue being built between the different teams. I've got a great partner over in EMEA that I work with as well. So we work in a very integrated fashion, even horizontally across the organization at a regional level. So the different regions, So a lot of great talent. But I think in terms of that, back to your original question, long answer, sorry, pretty much all of the core functions you would expect and hope for working in region, and I'm working within ultimately, with my I've got the great privilege of leading that team.
What were some of the changes that you made? You joined Twilio 2.5 years ago. What were some of the changes that you made? You kind of touched on it very briefly, but I'm curious to know, what did that look like that you came in and you're like, these things need to change for us to be able to drive that innovation?
It started with sales. Really getting and first and foremost understanding the way the sales org operates, thinks, really understanding what their hopes and dreams were in terms of when it came to marketing, understanding what they thought of marketing. It's always an important starting point. I think any marketing leader worth their salt would start there, because at the end of the day, they're our first customer. What's our job? Our job's to get a seller in front of a customer and hopefully have a conversation that is consistent with the experience they've had up to that moment, right? So a lot of that engagement that occurs before the seller meets the customer starts with marketing, right? So it's really important that those two folks, when they come together, have a conversation that has symmetry to it, in the sense of the experience and the messages that have been consumed up to that moment, that there's continuity there, right? So in order to do that, you need to really understand the seller and ultimately where they're at in their own journey, in terms of their own enablement, in terms of their own understanding of what our story is and how we're telling it in the market. Are there insights that we can gather from them that improves our ability to tell that story? So I really start there first with the sales leaders and understanding their hopes and dreams, like I said, or hopes and fears actually, and then work back from there. And if I think about when I first joined, they were all acknowledged the great work the marketers were doing, but they just didn't understand what they were doing. It wasn't presented in an orchestrated fashion. They weren't really clear on, what each function was doing and how they work. So that was where I started taking those insights from those conversations I had with sales, and then looked at, okay, clearly we have a very fragmented approach to how the marketing team's working. So back to my earlier point, there was a big focus on building that sort of brand to revenue mindset, that vision that we anchored against, both sales and marketing against. So how do we together build this brand to revenue engine that enables each party, and that's including not just sales, it's SDR teams, partner teams. All of us then start and look at how do we work together in a more orchestrated fashion. Now, it's a journey, not a destination, right? This takes time, right? So it's not something that I would say we've solved even today, right? It's going to constantly evolve, right?
Were there any structural changes to the marketing team that you also implemented?
Yeah, definitely. Like in terms of, like I said, again, we had global folks in region that were not operating in any integrated fashion with the regional team. They were just reporting into global. They were doing their jobs, but they weren't necessarily communicating with the local teams. Even the local team, as in when I say local, I mean the APJ hires in the field that were under my sort of remit. They weren't really talking to one another well. Field was doing what it wanted to do. Digital was doing what it wanted to do. Campaigns was doing what it wanted to do. And they weren't all integrated. And not through any fault of the individuals. They were all really great talents trying to do really great work. So really my job was to look at how do I create that connective tissue between these different folks to enable them to have more meaningful conversations and ultimately lead to better outcomes for everyone, right? And then obviously we had that was all with the backdrop of the significant economic headwinds that were hitting the tech sector globally. Mm-hmm. So we were navigating as a company, obviously some changes ourselves. So the first 18 months was, I think the first 18 months was, pretty interesting in that respect for me from a professional perspective, and even for the talent I was working with. They hadn't been through such challenging times and responded really well. Like I was super proud of the team. They really leaned into all of what we were trying to achieve, and both at a meta level, at a Twilio sort of global level, as well as what we're trying to do in region.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Because I think that's a great segue for getting into some of the creativity, some of the innovation that is coming out of the APJ arm of the business, especially the marketing and what you've brought to the table. What comes to mind on that front?
I mean, there's a fair few things. I want to preface it is that is all driven by my global leadership, his ability to enable me to look at driving change, in the business that's needed in region, but also then it's not possible without the great partnership I have at other levels. Like my Peter Bell, who's my counterpart in EMEA, him and I work very closely together in looking at what EMEA and APJ unique requirements are, because there's similarities between Europe and APJ in terms of cultural nuances and languages, etc. So we often work together to look at how do we help global better service our needs by having a more unified approach to the ask we make of them, right? Because
what does working closely mean, Nicholas? And by that question, I mean the nitty gritty of it. It's like you might go and say, I have a weekly cadence with him. We will meet up every quarter. I don't know what it is, but
great question.
Logistically,
so
what is that exactly?
Every Monday I have a call with Peter. So every Monday we have a call that's focused on exactly what I just spoke to. My head of demand creation does the same with her counterpart in EMEA. My head of digital does the same with her counterpart in EMEA. My team literally was in Dublin last week. My whole campaigns and digital team were in Dublin with Peter's team and some representation from global. And this is why I love Twilio. Like, our leaders understand the importance of getting teams together and people together. That team's sole job was looking at how do we improve integration between our sub-regional field marketing teams, our regional teams, and our international teams and our global teams. They spent 3 days together workshopping, working through identifying ways we can improve our collaboration. So you have this empowerment coming from our CEO, Chris Kohler, our CMO, down into the leaders that are ultimately charged with running the marketing organizations, and we're empowered to pass that through that empowerment. And a true, empowerment's used,
loosely.
But I genuinely feel if you do get it right and you do generally put some meaning behind that, you can really drive change at scale quickly. And again, and also then are willing to make the investments that enable the teams to come together. So there was the cadences we've built between the different leaders and functions. I think that's been really critical, enabling us to harness, again, that collective intelligence, not just in APJ, but across the business. Because at the end of the day, if you're a global resource, someone sitting in North America, and you've got 3 regions, so if you've got APJ, Latin America, North America actually as an independent region, and then Europe all coming with separate asks, it makes life a lot harder, right? So what we're trying to do is simplify that by aligning as regions.
Yeah, right.
I also have a regular call with Latin America, right? My counterpart in Latin America. So we use that as our opportunity to identify. We look at one another's work. Who's doing really cool stuff? Right? Can I use that in my market? Can I iterate on that? Can I innovate on top of that? Again, that's very much at the heart. Being curious is one of our core values, and that's I think another key enabler for us to really move quickly in making the adjustments that are needed. Yeah. So hopefully that answers.
You did. I derailed the question.
Yeah.
We're exploring some examples.
Yeah.
It's very clear that the leadership kind of pushes us down, but really lives these values and makes sure that the organization does as well. I from far watching Twilio, I've been amazed by how many retreats you have and how many times you get together. And, I think that's very unique for Twilio compared to, the number of clients that we have on X-Growth side, where it's like Twilio team meeting in Bali, Twilio team meeting in Thailand, meeting here, meeting there. And I'm like, this is fascinating how that you said that bringing the team together, you really live that. And it sounds like a simple thing, but it just has such a profound impact. But I want to go back to my question of like, what are some of the examples in terms of the innovation that has come out of the APJ region?
Yeah.
Due to the enablement from the leadership, of course, but what are some of those examples?
Yeah, I'll come to that. Just another key important point, I think, for those that aren't as familiar with Twilio, our leaders moved to a work from home policy right around COVID hit, right? When COVID hit. And they've maintained that. Actually, our CEO has made it very clear, as long as he's CEO, we're going to be a work from home first company. So that's the important. So if you're going to do that strategy, which I'm fully supportive of, is you need to ensure you create the ability for teams to come together, and which is, again, something that the business is enabled. So those workshops that you talk about are a direct consequence of our leadership's enabling us to have the funds available to bring the teams together. And those are, if you ask anyone in my team, they're hardcore workshops. So we go in and we work hard. There's obviously time to enjoy, food and break bread and that type of thing. But they really are focused on driving improvements in the business. So the team leans in. We have a very full agenda, and that is really at the heart of how we are driving innovation. So if I come to your question, what type of innovation? Well, let me start with the less sexy stuff, right? Those workshops often focus on things like budgeting, planning processes. How do we drive improvement and innovation in how we allocate our budgets out? Are we optimizing that? How do we build our bottoms-up, top-down planning process? How do we ensure that those plans are mapping to our ability to track meaningful outcomes that help sales achieve their goals? How do we ensure the content we're creating is actually aligned with what customers need, and ultimately are going to create value. So that's where I think we started, and we saw significant innovation in how we had been doing things over what was occurring before I got here, which, if I'm really honest, was a more random acts. It wasn't really, again, I would drive everything back to this idea of brand to revenue. How do we capture someone's attention? How do we become that signal in the noise, and ultimately create and curate content that enables us to help inform, either bring to attention a topic that someone may need to be thinking about and hasn't yet to start thinking about, or if they're already thinking about it, how do we help guide them in making more informed decisions and ultimately create a movement in their organization that leads to a positive outcome for the business, but also for them individually, professionally. So a lot of the innovation that we've been driving in region for our team has been really focused on achieving that, right? So looking at how do we, first of all, start with our operating practices. How do we build an integrated marketing campaign? What does that even mean? Defining those terms, ABM, again, a topic I know you're passionate about, right? Again, what does ABM mean to us, and what does it need to mean, and what does it mean to sales? How do we build that connective tissue? So it's really exploring those types of topics and going deep, understanding also what are the sort of some of the professional skill gaps that we have, and how do we address that with the team, right? So, again, a lot of our workshops are designed around helping address those types of topics, So innovation, often everyone thinks about the shiny sort of, creative that gets produced. But really for me, innovation starts with really understanding your people, processes, and technologies. That's really at the heart of what we've been doing. So like working with MOPS and understanding how do we improve lead management? Have we got the best tools in place? Have we got the right connective tissue created there that enables someone expressing interest to really find their way through to a SDR or seller in the most efficient way possible, right? So that's been really the starting point, really that people, process, and technology element, and then you start to build up from there to the more fun stuff and sexier stuff around in terms of
I want to explore the fun and sexy stuff, but it's just fascinating how the basics drive growth. And I was thinking about this very recently. Somebody asked me, and I don't want to derail this conversation, but somebody asked me about the work that we do at our agency, and they're like, why are you different? And there were a bunch of different sexy, quote unquote, sexy answers that I could give to that. And after the call, I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think it's actually the little details that are not sexy that. It's like we have to make sure this team communicates to that team. That drives growth. Or we have to make sure that this person is on top of this so that therefore that ball doesn't drop. It's not sexy at all. Oh. It's not about the creative, and those have their own place. But it's been on my mind, and you said it right now. It just came again in front of mine. So I love that answer. That it's the not so sexy stuff. No. That are very critical in the foundational elements of what you're doing. But everybody also wants to hear about the sexy stuff. So let's touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that we've had fun doing in that area. The one area that I think we'll come on to later maybe is some work around the AI space that we've been doing. I don't know if you want me to dive into that now, but that's
we can.
That's an area that I'm super excited about. Actually, when I joined, there's a great guy that was working for me at the time. He's now in a global role as a consequence of his amazing work. Piyoj came to me early on, super excited about the topic he wanted to talk to me about. I remember clearly we were in one of the meeting rooms, and he was saying we have this we have this self-serve platform. So just for those that aren't familiar with us, Twilio is a customer engagement platform. We serve customers globally. We have about 300,000 customers globally, about 3 million developers that actually use our technology. So a lot of the journeys that customers have start with their developers coming to us. So they'll sign up on our platform and look at using our capabilities, our communication platforms as service capability to create messaging and voice capabilities that enable them to build that into their mobile apps or websites. So if you want to communicate with someone, you can use our tech to do that, right? So they'll go in and the developers will start playing around with our technology. In region, we have about 80,000 people sign up a quarter, something like that. It's a significant number. And when I joined, there wasn't a lot happening with that data. Like it was coming in, people were signing up. They would ultimately, hopefully, connect with a seller if they had any questions. But other than that, they were sort of on their own, right? There was documentation they could access, but again, it was very manual, in terms of the experience they were getting. And Pure had this vision of taking this data, building machine learning capabilities that leaned into both predictive and generative AI capabilities were coming on, the latter that was coming on around the same time, to think about how we could engage this data set in a more effective way, right? And I want to be really clear, I had no involvement in this other than getting excited and obviously giving him my blessing for us to start for him to, go off and start unlocking this. It was super exciting to see the work he did. Ultimately got the attention globally. It quickly moved into a global pilot. So it started as an APJ pilot. So that's where I'm sort of proud that this sort of originated out of our region and really sort of is a good signal to businesses to look at the talent they have all over the globe, right? And tap into that global talent pool because often you have these amazing people in different parts of the world. And again, that's what I love about Twilio. That ecosystem is really tightly knit. It's easy. Like that was not a hard initiative for me in the sense of getting the approval or green light. I had the autonomy to say to him, yeah, go for it, mate. Let's see where this goes. Once it started to yield results, he was able to plug into the US-based teams. They then started to see the opportunity here. And now that's ladded up into a full-blown global initiative, which is really leaning into all of what AI can bring to the table now, right? So, and again, I want to be clear, it's like the predictive and generative AI is coming together. So he's built models that enable us to look at those folks that are signing up. We can start looking at, I think, about 400 different demand signals.
Wow.
That then start to signify, Shaheen looks like he's got the right persona, the right business. We've got your corporate or email ID, so we know you're legitimately working for business. You're engaging with the platform. There's two AIs. We have Ed, who's an outbound AI, and Isa, who's an inbound AI agent. So Isa, so if you have questions, like you do a talk to sales form, instead of getting routed to a human, which is what would have happened in the past, we'll route you through to Isa. She'll start working with you and helping answer questions. The entire knowledge base of Twilio is loaded up into Isa, so she's able to constantly learn as well. So not only she does have our data knowledge base that's loaded up, but through the interactions that she's having with you, is learning from those interactions, right? And is enabling her to improve her ability to serve your needs, right? Ed is an outbound agent, right? So he's looking at folks that maybe haven't reached out to us but are engaging. Again, the signals are firing, indicating that Ed's indicated, oh wow, Shaheen looks like he's definitely potentially a prospect that would benefit from Twilio. And again, that AI agent will reach out to you. And what I mean by reach out, it'll develop generative AI communications using generative AI that are much more personalized and individualized to you. As part of that outreach sequence. So whether it's an outbound or inbound, those agents are working in concert. And the results are phenomenal. Like, again, I most really can't share sort of specifics in terms of pipeline and revenue, but we're talking significant numbers here, like that are incrementally would have been lost without those capabilities being harnessed. So, and the cool thing also, it's integrated with humans. What do I mean by that? So we have what we call digital sales reps, DSR. So again, depending on the profile of the account, the spend, etc., it can get those opportunities can be handed off to a human as well. So and again, those DSRs are being supported by the AIs to drive those interactions with with the prospects they're dealing with. So again, this is a great example of the values of the company being applied and enabling folks in the teams to be able to go and actually implement really cool capabilities that I think are really going to transform our business and how we service a business at scale, right? So yeah, if you think about the huge volumes that I was talking about, the tens of thousands of folks engaging with our platform, being able to service them in a scalable way, it's using AI agents, but also then layering in human interactions with that when needed, when the right time occurs, and supporting those human interactions also with AI and enablement, and enabling them to have meaningful conversations. Because another thing that the company did, which I was really excited about, was all of our SDRs also had access to ChatGPT, which also saw our own instance of that. We had it loaded up all of our knowledge base into that. So again, SDRs can have a conversation with a prospect using those tools to, again, enable them to field calls that, or questions that they, let's be honest, if you're a 20-something-year-old, you don't have the full knowledge base of the company in your head. No company can do that with any SDR. So again, using AI there has enabled those agents to have more meaningful conversations with. So those are a couple of examples there. The other area that I've been really excited about, and again, it's something we've partnered on together, is looking at also how we can approach a more how we could reimagine the way we approach account-based marketing and how we look at working with sales to really have a much more focused approach to how we target, specific accounts in particular industries, and think of it in a more integrated fashion. And again, I think that was an area that we've done some really great work on, which I think has yielded some amazing results. And actually, I think we talked about this beforehand, even managed to change some of the perceptions of some of the sales leaders in terms of the importance of that approach and, using, really ingenious sort of direct mailer approaches, which again, you and your team helped us with, which I thought was really great. And helping us rethink the approach to how we create and curate customer engagements that, are novel and different, right? Yeah, so we've done some really cool work in that space as well, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I feel like the AI example that you gave, it's where everybody wants to be at. That collaboration between the dynamic between an AI and a human, where the sales is kind of managed or generated by AI, where you can't fully leverage a person. You just don't have the head count. That's really, really fascinating, and I think where a lot of people want to get to.
Yeah, I was just at an event yesterday here in Melbourne with a bunch of senior folks, CTOs, CMOs, and we were talking about this topic. And generally, I think there's there's excitement and anxiety that comes with that topic, right? For me, it's more excitement because I see what's possible. And I remember when ChatGPT first burst on the scene, 22, 20, it would have been late 22 or around there.
Or late 21, something like that.
Around there. And, I was pretty much straight in leaning into it as a new capability and quite quickly saw the value it could deliver businesses and myself. And I remember saying, actually, one of our offsites with my team, I remember putting this slide up and said, if you think, I'm a student of history, I love history. And if you think about sort of where we're at the moment, you look back for similar sort of moments in time, I liken what's happening now to the Industrial Revolution, yeah? So, that back then machines were created ultimately to do the jobs that humans couldn't do. What we've entered now is an age where humans will do the jobs that machines can't do. And I challenge my team to think about that. What does that mean for them, right? What does that mean for them individually? And that's the opportunity they've got to look for. So I think if you come at it through that mindset And I think it's really important to really start thinking about, okay, so if I'm a marketer, PR, product marketing, field marketing, campaigns, sales, whatever role you're in, you need to start thinking about how you can leverage these capabilities in new and exciting ways. And that's why and that was sort of the discussion we're having yesterday with some of the leaders, and there was consensus there that that's really what's needed. So it's really a growth mindset type of approach that's needed to really see the opportunities, because it won't happen on its own, right? You need individuals that understand and see the possibilities to lean into that. Like Pjorge is a great example who helped drive that change. Like he had the vision and understanding. Now he's a data scientist, so he naturally had the smarts and capabilities to bring it, but he also had to have the creativity to see that possibility as well. And I think it's those two elements coming together. So it's both the art and the science. Like in marketing world is gonna, the science element is becoming increasingly important, but you still need the humans that can see and understand what the data is saying and see and spot the insights through the data that enables them to think creatively. Then how can we create a new bit of content or message or whatever, or a new strategy there. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's certainly what we're thinking.
And it brings up another question for me where, how do you go about enabling your team with AI? Because one of the challenges that I think you're right, people are scared about AI. And I personally think rightly so, because I think there are definitely going to be certain roles that are going to be impacted. I was chatting we had Amanda Kalo, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right, on the podcast. And she was the founder of 6 Sense, moved on. She's founded another company, One Mind. And she's like, I'm on a mission to completely change what AEs are doing and potentially replace solution engineers, sales engineers. And I don't think we will need them in later point, right? That's her mantra. And I was like, this is a because everybody kind of approaches it and says, oh, it's who uses the person who uses AI is going to replace you versus the person who doesn't use AI. And her view was quite different. I was like, no, there are going to be roles that's going to be gone. But one of the reasons I think a lot of people are hesitant to lean into AI is because they get overwhelmed. There's just so much information. It's so hard to keep track of and know what's happening. Even if you take, ChatGPT is the most used, has the largest brand equity in the LLM space. I feel like even that is like, oh, okay, so I can talk to it. Now I can create these custom GPTs. It's a new thing in there. Now there are these canvases. What are these? And it's like you got to constantly be on top of it. Is there an approach at Twilio where you, or maybe it might be a global initiative, to keep the team across what is happening in the AI world? Is that an initiative? How do you make sure that the team is, again, not overwhelmed, doesn't fall behind? It's just like, this is too much. I can't do this. I can't keep track of this. Do you have anything in place for that?
Yeah, I'm gonna push back on your previous guest's maybe point of view a little bit. I like being controversial, so
Let's do it.
I don't necessarily agree 100% with what she said. I don't disagree that roles. I would reframe it. Roles will change in terms of scope. Not necessarily all be eradicated, right? I think about the transformation programs I've run across multiple companies, significant, 7-8 figure and transformational projects that I've been part of, either directly for the companies I've worked for or partners I've worked with in the BPO outsourcing space. I can name pretty much every solution engineer that I've ever worked with in that journey. The complexity of people, process, and technology and the understanding that is required in that space is significant. So solution engineers, I don't think, have any great fears in that respect because their job is really to help. A great solution engineer will spend time understanding a company's people, process, and technologies, and help illuminate how their technology is going to help drive transformational change there. That's still very much a human interaction. I'm not going to write a check for $1 million plus without having deal with some have some human interaction in there. More transactional stuff, more sort of transactional sales. Yeah, maybe. But I think in terms of what I think is going to happen, and again, I don't like trying to predict the future, but what I'm seeing, and I'm just doing this through what I'm seeing even in just my own role, right, and how I perform my role, is that the scope will change and the ability to do more will increase, and to redeploy time that was spent on more transactional work will be freed up, and my ability to redeploy that into more productive outcomes, right? Whether it's strategy, for example, in my case, right? I'm seeing a significant increase in capacity now for me to spend more time on having meaningful conversations with sales leaders, with my peer group, right? I think that's where AI is going to enable. Like I think about a campaign marketing campaign person. Again, they're going to have more. They're going to have a better ability to analyze the performance of not just a campaign, but individual components of that campaign and content, right? And start to identify what's working, what's not working with a high level accuracy as a result of the machine learning capabilities and AI capabilities that are becoming available to them to do that analysis, right? So so the skill set change will change there for sure, right? But yeah, I'm actually optimistic about it, right? Now, will I need to grow my teams to? Will I need as many headcounts going forward in terms of growth as I grow the business? Most probably not. I will see. I won't need to throw as many people at problems I might be facing. But a lot of those issues are more often not driven as a result of the transactional type stuff, right? The administrative work, right? So that will be the stuff that will get freed up. But no one really likes that part of the job, right? They want to focus on the cool stuff, right? And I think that's where the exciting stuff is. Back to your question. Again, I know I sound like a fanboy of my leadership team, but I am genuinely. I think everything starts with your C-suite, right? And I'm very fortunate to have a CEO, CMO, Chief Product Officer that are all very much leaning into AI, not just in terms of how we incorporate it into our own products and services, which we've always been on that journey long before it became trendy, but also looking at, in Chris Kohler's case, how do we use AI tools and capabilities as a marketing team? So looking at unlocking those capabilities in a way that enables our teams to scale and drive meaningful sort of outcomes for the business. So yeah, I'm really lucky there. We've got a Tiger team globally that's set up that's looking at all the different tools that we have currently, looking for are we optimizing those? Are we using them? If we're not, why not? And also are there new tools that we could benefit from? So there's that approach as a business. And I think that's really cool, right? If you've got a leadership team that understands the importance of that and is leaning into it versus backing up and sort of throwing walls up against those types of capabilities, which is happening.
It is happening.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm seeing like some of my peers and they like, IT's shutting everything down. I was actually at a dinner a few months back where I was sitting with a lot of senior CIO, CSOs, and some of them were saying, one was even had made the comment that this is a fad. It's going to go away. And I liken it, I said, I see this as almost like 1998, 96, 98, when the internet burst on the scene. People thought that was a fad, and clearly it isn't. So I think you need to be leaning into it, but you need to lean into it cautiously, right? You don't run in blindly. I think that's where good CIOs, CTOs, CSOs, and C-suite understands the importance of taking steps, leaning into it, but doing it in a measured way, right? In an intelligent way. And I think, but there's always going to be a little bit of risk, right? You can't completely de-risk everything. You just got to do a calculated approach to that, I think, yeah.
Nicholas, how are you using AI today? I'm curious to know what how you're using it personally, but also how you're using it for work. So I don't know which one you want to tackle first.
I'll start with work because that's where it started for me.
Okay.
I reckon it would have been back when I had that conversation with my team, maybe weeks before that, where I talked about, machines were there to help people do the jobs they couldn't do. Now we're at that age where people do the jobs machines couldn't do. So my first use case of ChatGPT I was speaking at an event and I had to give a 50-word bio, and I was spending like 40 minutes trying to get my bio down to 50 words, and I couldn't get below 53. Clearly, I'm someone who likes to talk. I mostly use more words than I need to. Anyway, I was trying to get it down, and I thought, hang on, let me try this ChatGPT thing out, right? And I threw it in, said get it to 50 words, and it did, like in a second, right? And actually did it better, right? And I was like, oh wow, that was the first sort of spark for me of seeing just how quickly that result came out. That I just spent 45 minutes on something that didn't need that amount of time, right? So that was when I started. That was literally the first moment where I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So I started leaning in quite soon, early into that. And like I said, Twilio was a very early mover. We brought our own instance of ChatGPT into the business. We loaded up our knowledge base. We deployed that into our SDR teams. The whole organization has access to our own instance of ChatGPT, which we can use on a daily basis. I started using it, testing it, everything from just saying, write me an email through to where I'm now at. And I find the best practice is I'll craft my communications. I'll use it as a way of helping me refine the notes, right? So I don't have to spend loads of times editing. Writing's not a natural skill set for me. It takes me time to write an email. So that would be a quite simple example of using it there. But then as I've seen it evolve, I actually use Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity. They're the three tools I license and use as well, both in a personal and professional capacity. The latter, professional less so because we use our own tool sets there. But Perplexity actually is another tool that I think is really cool. I've seen the deep research capabilities that it has is amazing. Like, so, running a query and saying, give me a point of view on, what are the CX trends, that are playing out in Thailand, and what are the geopolitical issues that we need to be thinking about, or what are the fastest growing markets in region. The ability to build reports quickly now are amazing. Like, that's where I think again, once you start playing and using, you can really go and create really amazing insights that would have taken weeks before, right?
Yeah.
And a team, maybe of individuals, and it would have been a lot of back and forth, right? Now I can actually follow sort of my train of thought in terms of when I'm writing those prompts and refining the prompts to really get to the outcome I want to get to. So I find from a research perspective, it's really good. Learning a new topic, if there's a new topic that's surfacing up, agentic AI. What is that? When that first came on, right? I remember hearing agentic AI and I was like, I didn't know what that was. So just using it to stay abreast of the latest and greatest topics, I think is really a powerful tool. On a personal front, Google, but I don't use Google in the traditional sense. I start either in Google Gemini or I start with one of the AI platforms now. So, which is really interesting when you think about it. Coming back to our profession, like marketing, what does that mean for us as we go forward, right? Because I do think there's a fundamental change going to occur in content marketing, and what does that mean, and how do we get found, and how does our content get found, and et cetera. But yeah, so professionally and personally, I'm using it in both, and I've seen it, even when it comes to like in the personal front, like we're buying a property in Australia, for example. We live in Singapore, so using it to better understand state laws and state regulations and requirements. So there's benefits on both sides, I see. But I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I love that answer. And it's fascinating the ways that you can use that you never thought about it. And I remember we have a 9 months old baby, and our small trash can doesn't manage the all the stuff that we all the trash that's coming out of the house. And I was like, we need to get a bigger one. How do I do that? And I sit behind ChatGPT, and it's like, well, you could request this from your council. And I'm like, how do I do that? How much does that cost? It's like, just go on this website, fill this form, and do that. Where traditionally that would have taken, easy an hour. 100%. Navigating a council website, good luck.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating from that angle. But you talk about Google. We, even at Xgrowth, we've started to track the traffic that comes to our website from LLM platforms, and that's very fascinating as well, and it's just been steadily increasing. My question is, how are you using Gemini? What are you using Gemini that you're not using ChatGPT for? Where does Gemini come in for you?
For me, and this is the interesting thing with the different platforms at the moment, there's sort of been this, preface, I'm not an AI expert. I've got a lot of smart people behind me that help me on this topic and go deep. But if based on I know enough to be, I guess you could say, dangerous. But if you think about what's been happening with ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, all these different LLMs, they've been basically mining the same data sets, right? Horizontally crawling the web, pulling what's available, right? And what you're seeing is they're all sort of coming to a point of parity. They get incremental improvements here and there. I think Grok 3 is now actually doing some really great work. That's the other one I've started to dabble with. So you see DeepSeek came on the scene, so they're all sort of incrementally improving on one another, but I think it's starting to plateau in terms of that. I think what's going to be the exciting next frontier is the verticalization of, and this is what I was talking with some of the leaders yesterday, is how do you take your data sets inside your businesses and start unlocking those and creating value. And I think partnerships between some of these platforms, and you started to see that. I think it was OpenAI, or I can't remember which one it was. Google, OpenAI did Reddit. They signed up, did a licensing.
Yeah, I did see something like that.
Yeah, so
I can't remember.
I think you'll start to see, and I think you'll see the news publications. I think that's where they'll start doing tie-ups with different LLMs to start going a little bit deeper in a more vertical way, and harnessing that data. So,
Alex, who was it with the?
Google, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so I think you're going to see more and more of that, especially when it comes to copyright sort of topics, etc. I think that's going to be interesting. Twilio's approach is we work with all of the LLMs, or a lot of the LLMs, not all, I won't say all, so I shouldn't have said that, but we work with a lot of the LLMs, and we also keep an open sort of approach to how you use LLMs, right? Because again, every business is different, right? The DNA is different. So we want to, remain a sort of an open, we're an open, API-led sort of company. That's at the heart of what we do. So we really would like providing the ability for different LLMs to work within our own tech stack, and I think you'll see more of that. But yeah, I think I like I said, I just explore different platforms, and I've most probably been using Gemini more recently, but I've started to play, like I said, with Grok 3 because that's performing really well as well. I don't think it'll be ever just one tool. I think you'll work with a couple of different tools in that respect. And as they sort of find their sort of niches, you'll start to have a set of tools that you might. And maybe there's an AI that sits on top of those, in front of those at some point, that then unlocks the best AI model based on your query. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. We were actually having a chat about this. The AI to AI, or the agent to agent communication, where we're talking about the purchasing, and we were saying that we think there's going to be a time that, let's say you're a HR leader and you're trying to buy a product, you just go to your agent and you say, this is what we need, these are the requirements, go do the search.
No.
And then that agent is going to go talk to the agent of X company and all 5 other ones. And the agent, he, she, it, I don't know, is going to do all the evaluation, come back and say, here are the options. In detail, I've done the analysis. I think this is the recommendation that we've got to go to. And either at that point, a human comes in and says, all right, maybe I'll do one evaluation of this final recommendation, or they just say, yep, go ahead and make the purchase. So that idea of, you say AI sits on top of it can be quite fascinating. Even in the next 5 years, the purchase experience.
Yeah, I definitely. Aside from your podcast, I also listen to All In podcast. I'm a big fan of theirs, and Chamath on there talked about he believes that at some point we'll get to a point where there'll be $1 billion turnover company powered by one employee. That's possible. So I'm talking to both my sons on that, encouraging them to, I look for opportunities. And,
get to work, guys.
In all seriousness, I actually am encouraging them to lean into AI tools now. They're 15 and turning 15 and 17. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited by the possibility. There's a company called Prodigy. Chrissy Lim has set up out of, actually her team's all over the globe. They're doing some really cool work in this space as well. They're looking at creating a platform for marketing departments, B2C, B2B, where you can go in and basically brief the AI. You load up all your brand Bible into the AI, so all your tone, stock imagery, the color palette, etc. And you can write a brief to the AI saying, here's the campaign I'm wanting to execute, and off it'll go and it'll build all of the assets required for that campaign at a fraction of the cost. And when I look at that, I'm like super excited about the possibilities of what that means for marketing teams. Again, in the world of digital marketing, let's be honest, typically you work with an agency, you might get 2 or 3 assets that come out of that. Now, those agencies also, because what she's doing with Prodigy, it's not just going direct, it's also working with agencies' ability to then scale their ability to support their clients' requirements. Because I think what will happen here in the agency world in particular will be the need for agencies to lean more in on the strategy and vision. Because again, this is where I think, if I think about that dynamic between brands and or businesses and agencies that support them, will be the ability for those agencies still to help the brand businesses, shape those strategies. Can we get back to ABM? Like, how do you create the right ABM strategy? How do you build the right interlock with sales? How do we ensure that we've got the right account planning methodologies in place? And ultimately, how do we pull those insights out to create the engagement experiences and the content, etc. Something like Prodigy will be sitting there potentially supporting marketers in that journey. Work. Doing the grunt work, right? Again, like I said, I think there's so many possibilities coming online, both at a corporate level, but also individual learning. Like, again, think about that, like learning a new topics. Like, I go back to my boys, that's why I'm encouraging them to lean in, just to learn, again, if you don't know anything about AI, you can use AI to learn about AI, right? So so many possibilities. I get quite excited by it.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. I mean, we launched a new AI well, not a new AI, but it's our call it the Discovery GPT, which is built on ChatGPT. It has custom instructions, and if our sales team is having a meeting with a new account, all they have to do is put the name of the account, and it goes and says, here's all the information that you should know. What do they do? Who are their competitors? Who are the potential customers at X Growth that are adjacent to this company you should probably talk about that is potentially relevant to them? Who do they target? What do you need to think about? It would do the search of do they have enterprise case studies in their organization? Is it mid-market? So should you focus on that front? And it blew my mind when we kind of built it out, and you just
100%.
put the name of the company, and it just goes boom. He's a one-pager right before you just read it 5 minutes before you call, and it does 45-minute research that it would have taken you.
That's where again I get I genuinely, when you lean in, you will see. I think my productivity level, I don't know if I said this earlier, is increased by between 20 and 30%. So that's significant, right? If you can apply, I got 20 odd people in my team in region. So if I can increase their capacity by 20 or 30%, sort of back to the point I was making, I won't necessarily need to increase the headcount as significantly as I might have had to do in times past, because I'm unlocking that potential that's sitting there through smarter use of technology. Now, here's a question for the listeners, and I think it's an important one. You need to ask yourself, both of yourself, your teams, your business, are we AI ready, right? So what do I mean by that? Like, I'm a big proponent, and I've already referenced this earlier. It's almost a cliche saying people, process, technology. But I really want folks to think about double-clicking on that and understanding, what does that mean? What does that concept mean, right? And it really does mean starting with your customer and your employees and working back to the technology. So yeah, I can deploy AI capabilities easily today, right? But if I haven't really done that work, and that's why, again, if you're a leader listening to this, I think it starts with you really understanding, what does this mean for me and how it can help me improve what I do. Because once you start exploring that, then you can start to see all these new possibilities. And then you need to identify, okay, tying back to a question you said earlier, what's our business doing? Like, again, our leaders, and Chris Kohler in particular, is wanting to build an AI-first marketing organization. What do I mean by that? He wants the marketers to be leaning into and understanding how they can get the best out of that. Because think about this now, it changes the profile of the person you're going to hire moving forward, right? So again, for the younger talents out there listening to this, the importance for them is to really get comfortable and start learning how to use these tools. Because someone like myself and Peter Bell and Chris Kohler, who's the CMO, that's what we're going to start looking for now, are talents that are able to use the Purges of the world that I referenced earlier, that can see what is possible through the use of this technology. But it does start with the people first. Then you look at the processes. What redundancy can we remove out of the equation through the smart use of technology? And then you get back to the technology itself. There's a formula I love using. I'll give it for free. OP plus NT equals EOP. OP plus NT
plus
NT equals EOP. This is an old chestnut I've used at many keynotes over the years, but I've resurfaced it again because I think some folks haven't heard it. Old process plus new technology equals expensive old process, right? So really need to zero in on, and when I talk about old process there, that's the people and process element, right? You start there first and then work back to the technology. Steve Jobs, one of my favorite quotes from him was, start with the customer experience and work back to the technology. That in essence is what fronts that formula, right? So start with the customer, then work back through that. What are the people and process changes and investments I need to make? Then you'll identify the technology. And at Twilio, that's what we want to work with our customers on. Yeah, I can sell you world-class technology, but if you haven't spent the time upfront understanding how our AI capabilities can help you, you're going to come back to me in a year's time, 2 years' time, and say, the project wasn't successful.
Yeah, true.
And the reality is, if I look at most failed projects that I've been involved in as a practitioner in this area, it came back to us not really putting that upfront investment in the OP element or the people process element. So yeah, that would be something I would encourage folks to think about. Something that, again, I'm really excited about at Twilio, that our leaders understand the importance of that. Yeah.
Nicholas, before we wrap up, we obviously touched on a few different areas here, from the innovation, from what's happening on AI, what you're focusing on, and so on and so forth. Is there anything else on this topic that you think, any questions that maybe I haven't asked that you think it's important for us to touch on?
No, I think, so again, on the topic of AI, what I think is important for folks, and again, we take seriously, is understanding the importance of transparency. So how are you using these technologies? Being open with folks. So what do I mean by that? Okay, simple use case could be, not letting people think that they're dealing with a human agent when it's an AI agent. So being open about that, right? I think that's important. That's a good example. So don't try to fake someone out with the perception that they're dealing with a human, because now with voice AI, you can
you could do that, really, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing, right? but make it really be open about that. And I think people will be comfortable with that, right? As long as there's a transparency there. And then be responsible. Know that, with the ability to, if I look at our voice intelligence capabilities, we can help customers take those conversations and actually, turn that to text, and then ultimately enable that data to be, used in a really smart and creative ways that enable to improve the experience. But you want to be not just transparent, but accountable and responsible for how you use those data, and ultimately manage that data. I think that's really important. The cool thing is, if you do this right, your ability to personalize at scale becomes a real possibility, right? That to me is where I get really excited as a marketer, right? Like the ability now to take those insights, that ability to transfer that into the ability to better understand Shaheen and what makes you tick and where you are on the journey, and then we're not quite there yet as a marketing team just yet, but what I shared earlier in terms of the self-serve motion is exactly what's happening there. What we're trying to do is personalize at scale there. Basically, we're really using those insights as 400
or be relevant at scale.
Yeah, but be relevant. And then ultimately, like I said, through that journey, be transparent, accountable, and responsible in how you manage that, right? I think that's a really important takeaway, I think, for folks. I think marketers in particular can get excited by, the possibilities that technology delivers to really personalize at scale. But there's a fine line between creating value and being creepy, right?
Correct.
So it's something you need to take serious as a leader. Because again, I think consumers, and whether it's B2C or B2B, folks, we're becoming more smarter, and our understanding of how technology is being used, and ultimately, most importantly, the data that we share, right? The value of that data. I think there's a growing awareness in the broader ecosystem of the value, and therefore there's a huge amount of responsibility, in particular for marketers, and how that's used. Because if you think about why I share that, is end of the day, trust is the bedrock of customer experience, and if you're not building trust, or you're damaging that trust, it has a direct bearing on customer experience, which then, as a marketing leader, has a direct consequence on brand value, brand awareness, and brand value, right? So I think, sort of as a key takeaway there, we've talked around a lot of cool stuff there, but my sort of call to action would be, first of all, start with, are you AI ready? And that would encompass a lot of what I just added there, as well as what I said earlier.
Your people, your
are your business ready? Are the operations? So back to the less sexier stuff, understanding that element of what needs to change, and then thinking of it through that lens of brand to revenue. How do I create an experience that goes from brand to revenue? And that will involve you working, again, for marketers, working with a broad set of stakeholders, not just marketing, but your sales, your SDR, your partner teams, your MOPS teams, your sales ops teams. Sales ops partnerships, another important one, right? IT. So there's a tribe of people that need to be brought into that. But really exciting times ahead for us, I think, in that respect. And again, it's a journey, not a destination. That old chestnut, right? It's going to be test, learn, adapt. Test, learn, adapt. I think that's the other key ingredient, is having that built into your cultural DNA. Enabling your teams to be able to experiment and test, learn, adapt. I think is going to be important.
I think that's very clear with AI. It's like you're never going to get there. It's just going to keep evolving. But really like the concept. I just wrote it down. Scaled relevance of how do you create scaled relevance, and that's definitely a takeaway for me. I'm going to explore that even more, that concept. But Nicholas, I just want to say, second time on the podcast. I'm glad that we've had you for the second time. This was an awesome conversation.
Totally, mate, and glad we did it in person as well. That's
absolutely,
we made it happen. So
absolutely,
thanks for having me, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell.
It was edited by Alexander Hipwell,
with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.